So, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all here in Milan for this masterclass of Masottina Riva in Verticale. Thank you also for all the wine lovers and friends in London at Pall Mall 67 and also in New York City at the Gattopardo restaurant. I would like also to express my gratitude for my friend Filippo that he will lead this particular tasting, blind tasting, through, we will make a journey through the Masottina Proseccos and the best selection of my family. I would like to introduce myself in a very quick way, just to take the tasting as soon as possible. I'm Federico Dal Bianco. I'm the third generation of winemakers of my family since 1946, based in Conegliano City. We are more or less in the Veneto region, more precisely between the Alps and Venice. And we make the majority of our production in sparkling way, especially the Prosecco DOC and the Prosecco Superiore from Conegliano and Valdobbiadene, the hilly area where the Prosecco is born. Now also UNESCO heritage area. And my family, the philosophy of my family is to achieving the best possible quality in our wines, thanks to the tradition and the experience since 1946, and the method that we use for making our sparkling wines and the wines. We use the gravity system to try to mirror the terroir inside the bottle. And we are exporters. We export in more than 40 countries with a production about 1 million of bottles. And we are here to try to elevate the standard of perception of the Prosecco in general, because that Filippo will upgrade all the info about the production of the three different appellations of the Prosecco world, and the Riva for us is best. So I would introduce my friend Filippo Bartolotta. A big applause for him that will lead the tasting. Thank you all again.
Allora, I was about to begin this tasting asking a question about what we were going to do today. So I was like, what are we going to do today? A vertical tasting of Prosecco. And to a lot of people, when I said, are you coming over? Now, well, the room is full, so that's great news. But when I said, are you coming over? Oh, I don't do Prosecco. How many times do we hear this, right? Like, how many wine appellations, there is this kind of racism where if you do some very famous wines, everyone is able just to sit down and host a tasting and a masterclass, and everybody's coming with the expectations to see that something that is meant to be good will be good. So there are some, how shall I put it, like some cognitive bias when it comes to wine as well. So it is true that Prosecco is like a very large appellation right now. There is over 600 million bottles, but that's true for many other appellations. So what's going to happen today is this. I'll give you a brief introduction to the region of Prosecco and the system, because I know that it's very complicated. Italy, under this point of view, is complicated. I mean, we have hundreds and hundreds of DOCs and DOCGs. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Then from the Prosecco region, we're going to get into Conegliano, we're going to get into Ogliano, we're going to arrive all the way to the Masottina winery. And after 2.5 hours, no, I'm kidding, after a few minutes, then we'll have Soms pouring wines for us. And it will be a double vertical tasting, starting from the youngest all the way down to the oldest, but something that I will explain later. Where are we? I always like to begin where is located the appellation. We are in northern Italy. We are in a place of Italy that could be actually pretty cold. if it weren't for the presence of various factors that make this place a suitable place for the vineyards. People have been making wine here, like all the famous Italian wine appellations as of the Romans onward. There are some documents talking about Prosecco, and as a matter of fact, I read documents about fines that were going to be given to the citizens of Conegliano back in the 12th century, that during harvest time, if you were caught stealing grapes, you were having a big fine. You couldn't go out with your dogs during harvest time. So what I'm trying to say is that already in the 12th century, there was somehow an appellation designed in this area. But when it comes to Prosecco, where is Prosecco made, and what is the difference between Prosecco DOC and Prosecco DOCG? That starts to be a little bit of a nightmare. So let's begin. As of 2009, Prosecco has become a DOC appellation that can be produced between Veneto and Friuli. 81% of the production is in the Veneto region. The remaining part will be in the Friuli region. Now look at this. You have roughly 24,500 hectares. 24,500 hectares of Prosecco DOC. Within this appellation, Prosecco can be produced with 180 tons per hectare. So a relatively generous appellation when it comes to the yields. Now, how many bottles? As of 2009, there used to be 150 million bottles. Today is 500 million bottles. As a matter of fact, when I was recently in the Masottina winery, there is an underground part of the winery, the cellar, that was prepared in 2007 to host the big cask for white and red wines. Guess what? After a few years, these guys are not able to sell whites and reds anymore because it's all about the bubbles. So this is why, of course, they do sell some whites and reds. There is a long-standing history, but the region has gone from 150 to 500 million bottles. If you look at the pyramid of Prosecco, the 3/4 of the pyramid, so 82% of Prosecco wine is DOC. The remaining part will be DOCG wine with Asolo, with the Asolo having a special mention. So we're going to move on from the Prosecco DOC. In 2009, there was a split between DOC and DOCG. So look at this. We start from an area that is just like that. Here you have the sea with Trieste, and here you have Veneto with Venezia. We shrink down, all the way down, hundreds and hundreds of miles, thousands of hectares to get down to Conegliano Valdobbiadene. Conegliano Valdobbiadene Superiore DOCG is the appellation where you will find the DOCG. You might come across to Asolo or Conegliano Valdobbiadene. We have roughly now 100 million bottles of Conegliano Valdobbiadene, and the hectares is 8,000 hectares. So 8,000 hectares and 100 million bottles. As you go up the ladder, you will find Rive, which is where we're going to focus today. So Rive will be about roughly 250, 249 hectares. There is 49 different Rive, and the bottles that are produced there are 2 million. The peak of the pyramid is about Cartizze, 1.2 million bottles, 109 hectares. So this is the pyramid of Prosecco. Now, if we can move to the glacier, so a big region, we're just going to go closer and closer. We're going to be in Ogliano, and as you can see here, we are in what used to be a glacier, and what you see around is what happens always when you have a glacier. So the ice, that was like 15,000 years ago, the ice has been pushing land outward and downward, creating a kind of a crown, a kind of an amphitheater that is not too tall. So it's 150 meters above the sea level. And then I know people say, oh, that's not much, right? But when you are on a flat land and you go 150 meters, the world would change. As a matter of fact, when we are in Masottina, like on the terrace of the vineyard, we are 150, 160, and you see, so basically we are like right here.
Yeah, we are on the edge.
Right on the edge. And what you see is this phenomenal, like almost like a slide that goes down, and it looks like a spoon. You see the vineyards that go all the way down into the spoon. Now, the rive are not in the spoon factor, but are on the edge. Rive in Italiano means shores. In Conegliano, it means actually steep slopes. So rive are steep slopes. The vineyards are cultivated on both sides. We are going to focus on two vineyards that are on the western slopes, what is called Ponente, in Italiano Ponente, porre, where the sun goes to sleep, west. And then the Levante side, Levante, levare, is where the sun would rise, so we are on the eastern slopes. Now, talking about terroir, this is the mesoclimatic conditions, so the conditions of that given valley. That given valley that is there is going to be influenced by 3-4 major factors. Number one is the Alps. Now, Conegliano is a funny spot because they have the pre-Alps that to normal people, they look like mountains. But if you go to their homes and say, should we go to the mountain? They go like, what are you talking about? Those are hills. And they are very tall hills. But behind the pre-Alps, they play a major role to defend this area from the super cold spells that come from the Alps. Then, all the way up in the Fadalto, in 100 kilometers, you will be in Cortina d'Ampezzo. 100 kilometers, you're going to be one of the greatest ski resorts in the world. And the Fadalto is going to be, like that valley is going to just get a lot of cold winds all the way down into the extinct glacier. Is that a good or a bad thing? It's an awesome thing. Above all, for global warming, having vineyards on this side it means that during summertime, there's going to be a major difference between the hilltops of the Ogliano hills and the flat tops. And if this wasn't enough, so Alps bring the super cold spells, okay, during summer, but they are protected from the pre-Alps, from the super cold. But then you have the eastern winds, what in Trieste will be called, our friends in Italy know, la bora, a super strong wind that in Trieste will make you fly away if you don't hold to a pole during the winter. When it travels to Conegliano, that wind is going to be a nice breeze that is going to make every summer a beautiful summer. It's almost as if when I was driving, when he was driving, I went to Conegliano a few weeks ago, and if you get off the train station, you just go across the station. There's this beautiful teatro, like a neoclassic building, and a few steps away from the teatro is Federico's home. So they're the boss of the little area there. And he said, like, why don't we go to see the hills before we taste wines? So, usually when you go to winemakers, they have Jeep cars and everything. He's got a Subaru. You know, one of those cartoon fast cars, super, super short. Come si chiama la macchina? SD. SD rally car. So I just tie my seatbelt and we go around these beautiful hills. The terraces in Ogliano and in Prosecco area in general are not walled. They tend to be like grass terraces. So they are UNESCO World Heritage Site. Does that make a difference? Since Valdobbiadene was inscribed in the UNESCO, does it make a difference in the glass? It does, because winemakers have to behave in a different way. As a matter of fact, 50%, if you have like 10,000 hectares of vines, you'll be having 10,000 hectares of forest. But also they have to look after biodiversity. Everyone is becoming more sustainable. And culturally speaking as well, all the beautiful villages need to be kept in a certain way. And as a result, you have lower yields and better wines. But going back to the Subaru, going into the vineyards, the cold spell that comes from the Bora, from the eastern part, is making, above all, the eastern part of these slopes super dry. So expectations, when we're going to be doing our tasting, is that the eastern slopes, the Levante, might be having extra extraction of sugars because the wind makes the berries drier, and as a result, you have more concentration. What else is there that I have to mention? I think I can start asking our team of Psalms to pour the wines. Facciamo immediatamente tutto insieme, ok? Partendo dai più giovani, andiamo in giù verso i più vecchi. Quindi cominciamo col 20, oops, I said it, it's the new vintage to begin with, 20-20 e poi si va indietro. What else I was going to say? Three-dimensional kind of Prosecco. When I was there, I went to taste all the berries. I think at the end of the year, I have the feeling that I'm going to be sent a bill for all the berries that I've eaten around the vineyards, but that's paramount. That's how I began with my grandpa, tasting berries, and it makes a whole difference in the world. With Federico, we get off the car, we go taste the berries on the western slopes and the eastern slopes. Difference are related to two biotypes of glera. Something that I didn't mention, but everyone knows, glera is the variety of Prosecco. Two biotypes, you have the glera lunga and glera tonda, and then each of these biotypes is going to have lots of different kids, lots of different clones. So when you go pick grapes in a Conegliano Valdobbiadene Prosecco Superiore vineyards, which are different also because instead of being 180 tons per hectare, they can only make 135, tons per hectare. So that already you have a lower yield. But when you go there and you taste, you will find completely different berries. The biotype that has got a longer shape tends to be a little bit sweeter, while the tondo tends to be a little bit more aromatic. But when you taste the grapes on the eastern slopes, you will find tougher skin than on the western slopes. So as a result, some of the wines do reflect a little bit of phenolic presence, like some materic presence on the palate. How is this tasting designed? This tasting is designed in a way that we're going to spend a few minutes together. I'm not going to tell you which is which to see whether or not we're able to detect any difference, and that would be nice. And we start from the youngest vintage. It's a double vertical going all the way down to the oldest vintage. Just to give you an idea, when first I was approached by these guys to do the tasting, I have to be honest, I was myself skeptical about going on a vertical tasting of Prosecco. I have done it in the past with other wineries. There is 3-4 wineries that can actually host a tasting with vertical going back, giusto?
Probably.
Almeno 3 o 4 che hanno una buona inventory. And as we were going down and down and down in the vintages, funny enough, at some points, the oldest vintage seemed younger than the younger vintages. What is the key factor to aging potential? Well, DNA of the grapes, soil type, and how they've handled the grapes. Because once again, if you produce 180 tons per hectare, or if you produce 90, like in their case, or if from that 90, you're going to even shrink down, because what they do when it comes to winemaking in Masottina, they have a press. So berries are the grapes are harvested by hand, little crates. They're going to get into the Masottina winery. They will be sent into a very soft press. So basically the berries are not going to be crushed immediately, but very softly they're going to be almost going into the press one berry at a time. As a result, they're going to choose what's going to go in and what's going to stay out. But also, the first press, and this is very cool, very different, is gravity press. So basically, once there is enough weight, the weight is going to press, and you're going to have a first percentage of free-run juice that hasn't been basically touched any kind of mechanical action whatsoever. When it comes to production, this means that out of 100 grams out of 1 kilo of grapes, instead of producing a bottle, you'll produce much less. To be honest, they don't do that with the entire vineyards, but only with these two. This is 2.5 hectares on one side and 3 hectares on the other side.
Yeah, more or less.
More or less. While we wait for the wines to arrive, possiamo averne un goccio di più, ragazzi? Un po' più, a bit more generous, because I'm going to down these in a second. Another couple of, before we wait for the wines, what I was going to say. Press, 2.5 hectares, 3 hectares, grazie. Semplicemente benissimo. What I was going to say, that in the Ogliano region, we have much more kind of dry condition, and above all, something that is very different from the other areas is the thermal inversions and the excursions at night. The nights in Ogliano are much colder than most other areas of Prosecco, so that will reflect into a lot of more aromatics in the wine. We're all starting with only one wine. Se potessimo tenere un passo, ragazzi, io pensavo di andare un po' più veloce se fosse un po' di più, perché vorrei i vini tutti insieme, se la squadra dei sommelier mi sente, perché le temperature sono abbastanza alte in questa stanza, e quindi ho paura di arrivare a quell'ultima in fondo e che questa è già pronta per essere bollita. Sorry guys over there in Miami, New York and London. Just a little bit of a technical notes for our psalms to speed up a little bit our pouring. What I wanted to say is how the character of Ogliano in general would reflect into more spicy notes than you would find in other Prosecco, into more ripeness, and into more generosity with the fruit. Let's start with vino numero uno. We have a lot of... this is like the nose, is an Ogliano nose, because together with the fruit, which is like peach, the white peach is there, but also there's an almond nose, lots of almond and almond flowers. I don't know if you agree, but together with these kind of like fruit aromas, there is also a presence of herbal kind of aromas. And you know, like the vanilla, the stick of vanilla, this wine didn't touch a day, an hour in oak. This is only related to the grape variety itself. I have I don't want to go too technical, but the benzoids is what is more packed with this kind of variety in the Ogliano area, and as a result, you have more of this balsamic action that comes through. Okay, impossible to spit. It's good that we are in Milano, we don't have to drive. The wine doesn't have too much residual sugar. This is a Brut, we can say that. So our friends in Milano that know the winery a little bit better already might know whether we are in the Ponente or the Levante. Is a 2020 vintage, so the first two wines, left and right, will be 2020, that I can tell you. Balsamic notes, cider. The residual sugar in this wine is lower than 5 grams per liter. And is the I don't know how much to say, but the slopes on this side tend to be a little bit tougher in soil and a little bit cooler at night. Vino numero 2, grazie. Okay. Wine number 2. When I first, and today is the same, when I first got into this double tasting, the first thing immediately that I got, tasting the second wine, the wine on the right, is this mineral gunflint note in the wine. This is a nose that is way less Prosecco in terms of expectations than you would expect. I have beautiful aromas of cedar, of pine tree. There isn't just the white fruit that is common in the Prosecco region, but there is way more to it. Some flowers towards the wisteria and jasmines are coming through this wine, very beautiful. So once again, when we try Prosecco, these might be more on the terpenes. When you have the rose petals that I'm getting here on the glass, you are more into the terpenes factor. The floral element and the vanilla still belong to the benzoids. But I get more of a smoky, peaty, and mineral trait on the nose of this wine. And if you go back and forth, you see what I'm saying, because sometimes we get lost into one of the glasses, but if you go back to the other wine, it's way more about the almonds and the ripe white fruit. Let's see on the palate. Let's see on the palate. Okay. Now, the palate of this wine seems to be having more acidity than the other wine. Question for you, do you reckon the wine is sweeter or drier than the wine number one? Pensate che sia più dolce o secco? Non è per fare un test, ma è soltanto perché c'è un po' un paradosso in termini di numeri, no? There is a bit of a paradox. So, like, which wine do you think is sweeter? Quale vi sembra più dolce, il primo o il secondo? Il primo vi sembra più dolce? Secondo? Okay, number 2 has got 3 times the amount of sugar than number 1. But there is a tension, a lime, lemon peel kind of tension that makes the wine really reactive. For me, the wine on the... Grazie ragazzi per aver accelerato. For me, the wine on the right-hand side has got this beautiful tension, lots of depth, a bit more sapidity despite the presence of the sugar. In this case here, we're moving from 4.8 to 1350 grams per liter. And the acidity is a little bit higher than the other wine. And as a result, you're getting these almost... You know, I know that could be difficult, and when somms try to find too many aromas in a glass of wine, I don't want to do that game, but we tend to be over-talkative when it comes to Barolos, Brunellos, and Burgundy. And when it comes to wines that are considered to be simpler, we refrain for pushing too much because we're afraid that we are gonna, as if we were taking the piece. But I'm getting way more like almost iodine, sea breeze on wine number 2. As you see, moving on your left-hand side, the third wine that we were poured is much deeper in color. So, as I mentioned, we're gonna go into an older vintage. And this time, I have to be honest, this wine is in way better condition than what we had back in the cellar a few weeks ago. I find the wine right now, perfect temperature. There is way more butteriness that is developing. More ripe, like riper fruit, more pear, more like pear Williams. What's the name of it? Honeydew melon, il melone giallo. And yes, you have the peach, you have more chamomile tea. There is, once again, these super spicy aromas, like the vanilla is always present. And here I'm detecting more of the orange blossom. Questo profumo bello dei fiori di zagara. So much riper. If you go back, though, you will see that there is this tension that is related to these spices. It's almost like if I'm getting the nose into a white chocolate cioccolato bianco, molto bello questo aspetto. Very round, very big, lots of mousse. And the wine, once again, it starts sweet. The wine has got a sweet attack. But all of a sudden, you see what's happening that wasn't happening with the other ones? We're finishing, even now, after 20 seconds, I'm still chewing fruit, citrus fruit, lime, lemons. I'm having a lot of juiciness that comes through this wine, so it means that it's alive and kicking. I find the juiciness of this wine the factor that keeps the wine alive. The mousse is still there. There is no traces of decay whatsoever. On the nose, you have more maturity, of course, but there is no signs of oxidization. What vintage do you reckon, if you guys want to shoot? I don't know if over in the US and the UK you guys want to start telling us what you reckon the vintage. Se volete provare a indovinare l'annata di questo vino, potrebbe essere interessante perché I find the wine being alive and kicking. The color itself is not showing much traces of decay. And moving on to the second wine on the right-hand side, I've got more of a cedar peel. There's a question in the room in Italy. Who's the name of the winemaker? My God, I'm enjoying so much the second two wines. I'm going to go back there in a second. A little pause on the tasting. The Del Bianco family has been purchasing these vineyards back in 1946. You started off the business. Adriano, che è Federico's father, started off with very few hectares in this area. And before you were able to build the cellar, it took 40 years, right?
Yeah, but we started with just only 5 hectares with my grandfather, Epifanio. And then through the second generation, we have achieved a total property, and we manage in total 280 hectares. And the majority of the Conegliano and Valdobbiadene hectares that my family owns are in the land of the village of Ogliano.
So it took 40 years to build the cellar because basically there was a law that didn't allow them to build volume if anything more than 2% of the vineyards that you owned. So it took him 40 years to have a good amount of vineyards to produce the cellar. So his father is the winemaker. His mother, nobody talks about your mama, Franca, that is like the secret boss of the business, holding the numbers of the company, right?
I'm the vice president. My brother Filippo is the head of sales. My other brother Edoardo is the head of production. Yes, my father is the winemaker. And my mother, Franca, she is the boss. So.
She's a silent boss. But you can tell when you sit down for dinner that she's the lady that takes decisions. The last time we had dinner, by the way, going back into the region for a second, 50 kilometers in half an hour you are in Venice. So when you go to Conegliano, be prepared to eat some of the freshest seafood in the planet. This moment is the moment of canestrelli that you can eat like 1,000. It's like some kind of scallops that you can eat, and that would be perfect and fantastic with Prosecco. Talking about matching food and wine, as a matter of fact, Prosecco is once again one of those wines that a lot of people say is just good as an aperitivo, but we've done a tasting, we've done a dinner going from the aperitivo, from the raw fish, all the way down to lamb. And when you do the right choices, you'll be able to compare and contrast in a wonderful way. I'm going to open to the Q&A session very quickly, but before we finish, once again, I'm detecting on the right-hand side more minerality when it comes to the nose. Once again, it's kind of like a gunflint, but also herbaceousness. And when I mentioned about the phenolic part, the second wine on the right-hand side has got a little bit of a materic tension, some bitterness, some almond bitterness right in the end, but that is well compensated by the mango and exotic fruit. Sweetness, once again, I don't see, I mean, you can tell that the wine number 2 has got more sugars, but actually, there is, once again, there is double the amount of sugar. So it's 6 grams per liter on the left-hand side, and it's 12 grams per liter on the other side. So this is a brut, and this here will be an extra brut. But I don't think that that's the fact that is influencing most of the wines. My feeling is that on the right-hand side, we're going with something that is a little bit saltier, a little bit more sapidity, and more minerality. Il vino numero 3, the third wine, is actually telling us a little bit about its age because it's darker, there is more amber kind of color. Oh my God, this is pretty bonkers, actually. Questo è un naso abbastanza inusuale per un prosecco perché viene fuori una nota pazzesca di zafferano e di cedro candito. This one comes up with a super unusual saffron note together with cedar, like candied cedar and anise. It's just like popcorn, caramel, burnt sugar, saffron. There is mango fruit, a lot of exotic fruit in comparison to the other wines. Very different. Some breadiness, some like biscuity pastisserie. Now, I actually think that is quite remarkable because I do not get the wine of course has seen a little bit of a more oxidative but not oxidized character. There is traces. The color is already talking about it. Let's make no mistake. I actually had an older, right now is like cotton candy, mango fruit, peach. And I'm enjoying though the saffron and balsamic note. There is almost like nutmeg in this wine. It's like a Christmas pudding. On the right-hand side, non capisco se il colore, we have a similar color. It looks like it could be a little bit lighter. Smokiness. There is much more smokiness on this wine. It's like face powder, a little bit of bourbon, once again, brown sugar. I'm getting like some quince marmalade. And on the palate, there is no that kind of the saffron is only on the left-hand side. There is a lot of sweetness. In this case, sugars are 16.70. I think the one on the left-hand side is a little bit drier than the one on the right. Yes, totally. Do you guys agree? Like the last wine has got less sugar residual. Now, what do you think about the wines? How old do you think these wines are? Qual è l'età, ragazzi? Volete dirmi su per giù cosa pensate? Che ne so, il vino numero 2 e il vino numero 3 sono tutte uguali le annate, ok? Quindi sono coppie, la più giovane, la mediana e la più vecchia. So we have couples like the youngest, the first two, left and right, the medium vintages, left and right, and then the last vintages. Ah, sì? Qui l'abbiamo capito, vero, che sulla sinistra abbiamo un cru e sulla destra un altro cru. Okay, because we're saying that apparently London isn't clear. So what we're having, guys, on the left-hand side, we have a single crew. So we have one single vineyard from the youngest to the oldest. The one close to you guys is the youngest. The one more farther away will be the oldest. And on the right-hand side, we have another 3 wines from the youngest to the oldest, another crew. Che pensate? What do you guys think? Ma si possono avere noi le domande, il Q&A con Miami, New York e Londra? Intanto inizio con Milano. Che pensate, ragazzi? Quanto sono vecchi questi vini? How old are these wines? Chi si butta? Il primo ve l'ho detto io, 2020. Il secondo vino, how old is the second wine? 18, 16, 17, ok. Possiamo cominciare anche alle domande e alle considerazioni, perché qui in sala there is a lot of people that know Prosecco and they know the winery. And so if you guys want to talk about it, other experiences and what you think about the wines, please come forward. Allora, to those that already know Masottina, when I said that there was a Brut and an extra Brut, you already knew what I was talking about. So I'm going to put them, allora, vediamo un po'. We have, tac, and like this, and on the other side we have these wines. Quanto è vecchio l'ultimo vino? How old is the last wine? 12? 12 years? More or less 12 years old? 10-12 anni. So we've done a tasting that has gone from 2020 all the way to 2014. As a matter of fact, we were meant to do 2010, which is phenomenal right now, because this 14, to be honest, I think is very interesting, but is showing a little bit of science. Da New York chiedono di non riferirsi ai vini con destra e sinistra, ma con i numeri, perché non sanno... Purtroppo a Milano non abbiamo i numeri, e quindi that's a problem. Hey guys from New York, the thing is that we do not have numbers in Milano. Sorry about this. I don't know how this happened, but once again, sicuri? 1, 2, 3, okay, thanks. So, on the left-hand side, close to you, is number 1. On the right-hand side is number 2. Then we have, going on, number 3, number 4, and the last 2 wines, the golden color looking, are number 5 and number 6. So what did we go for? It's going to be clear now. Let me tell you what we did. We did a vertical tasting with the Conegliano, Valdobbiadene, Rive di Ogliano, Rive di Ponente on the left-hand side, so the western slopes of our vineyards, and on the right-hand side we had the Rive di Levante, starting from 2020 all the way down to 2017, okay? What is the difference between the two? Well, there are a few diversities. First of all, is that on the Ponente vineyards, there is less residual sugar, so it's roughly anything between 4 and 8. The last wine has got 8 grams per liter. The wine number 3 has got 6.2, and wine number 1 has got 4.8. So less residual sugar on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side, we're going from 13 grams, 12 grams, and 17 grams. So the Brut has got less residual sugar and is on the western shores, so the wine has got less concentration. The vines are younger, quindi le vigne di Ponente sono vigne più giovani, and the vines on the Levante side are 40 years old. And this is one of the reasons why I believe there is a little bit of more minerality and a little bit of more tension when it comes to the right-hand side. Però sono curioso di sentire anche un po' dei vostri commenti su come l'avete trovati. How did you guys find the wines? Chi è che attacca? What do you prefer? The Ponente or Levante? Or what is the wine? What is the surprise? Sì. Ok. Mhm. Della bolla. Non sono... Ok, grazie Sissi. So, io non so se viene tradotto la roba in italiano o no, but for our friends in Miami, New York and London, Sissi Baratella, journalist for Gambero Rosso, here in Italy said, oops. Vedevo Dr. Wine, I'm so sorry. She says, she knows the area very well. She says, the Ponente wines, the wines on the right-hand side, seem to reflect a little bit more the company profile. But at the same time, they have, the nose are very interesting. The last two wines, of course, are showing a little bit of decay on the palate, but the phenomenal things about the 6 samples is the presence of bubbles. The mousse is very strong, is very intense, is very alive and kicking. Anyone else? Qualcun altro che vuole provare? Mi indicano, ma non vedo lo schermo, è chiuso. Qua giù in fondo? Chi c'è? Giulia? Però c'ho lo schermo spento, se qualcuno mi aiuta vi rispondo. Okay. In the meanwhile, while we're waiting for the questions to arrive on the screen and our Italian friends to give us more insights, I know that London, solo Londra? London, guys, all right, mates, you have 9 wines. We have 6, you have 9. So, Ok. Allora, le annate... Da New York chiedono le annate dei vini, esatto. We started off wine number 1, wine number 2, 2020. So wine number 1 is Ponente 2020, Levante 2020. Now, wine number 3 and wine number 4 are 2017, both of them. So Ponente 17, Levante 17. And then we have the last 2 wines that are Ponente 2014, Levante 2014. So we went from 20 all the way down to 14, getting a sense of, I think I agree with Sissi, the spiciness of the Ponente side reminds more of Masottina, and the Ogliano slopes that tend to deliver more of this character. But at the same time, I like the depth and the intensity of the Levante wines. Qualcun altro che vuole fare un commento? Cos'è che vi sono piaciuti? O se vi aspettavate di trovare i vini così? So 2014, someone here is loving the 14 and is asking about how much is the residual sugar. We are on wine number 2, wine number 4, and wine number 6. We are around 12 grams per liter, more or less. Some is 12, some is 13, but super giù siamo su quella linea là. On 1, 3, and 5, we are around 6 grams per liter. Allora, stiamo scoprendo, Matteo, intanto dimmi pure. Allora, how long, question in Milano with Matteo Borré is, how long did the wine stay in the fermentation tank?
Basically are 3 months minimum till 4 months, no more.
So 3 to 4 months of the wines have been in contact with the lees?
It depends by the vintage, by the yield of the vintage, if there is some more or less grapes in the vineyards. So it's all about the structure. More structure you have, for us it's better to take a little less time in the autoclaves. Less structure, we need a little bit of more support from taking more on autoclave.
I find it interesting in the left-hand side, maybe it's the bora, is the wind that makes the grapes drier, and also the fact that it's 40 years old vines. It gives the wine a little bit of more, that morenic characteristics. I've got to agree with the fact that 2014, although I find them seductive, and although the mousse and the bubbles are alive and kicking, I think it's more, the wines are going more towards the esters, you know, like esters in terms of aromas give more of the grapes and the apple, and a little bit of the acetate kind of aroma. So the banana, the ripeness of the banana comes through the wine, a little bit of more pineapple. I actually can't get enough of the nose of the 2014 Ponente. Questa nota di zafferano è bellissima. It feels like this would be perfect with some risotto alla milanese. Sì? Sì. Allora, how old are the vines in the Ponente side? Siamo su una decina d'anni sulle vigne di Ponente. Sono un po' più giovani, no? 12 years. E invece, question on number 3, qual era la domanda? No, I think we're talking about how the wine number 3, according to our colleague here, has got a little bit of more like petrol and peat kind of aromatics. So he was asking whether the cork changed throughout the years, and Federico say nothing changed, so pretty much the same corks. I think there is also like a bitter almond. 2017 has been a pretty hot vintage. Maybe that could be one of the reasons. Se ti viene in mente qualche cosa rispetto a questo sentore un po' più fumé anche, no? Cioè sembra sia una parte più di peat, di idrocarburo di affumicato. So on the Ponente side there was more rain, so maybe that's one of the reasons. Scusate, avevo sentito altri interventi, Sissi, che voleva dire? Question from Milano: how is sugar influencing the aging potential and actually, as a matter of fact, the aging of Prosecco? Federico.
Thanks to my father, that is the winemaker. Thank you for this.
Questo non l'hai messo nei guai.
No, basically, less sugar you have, more longevity you will find it. So the brut version, or if you have also an extra brut version, possibly could be stay longer on the bottle. With the more sugar, sometimes you lose the flavors in a quick way.
I have the feeling, though, that in this case, we're talking about two different slopes. So the western slopes don't get the super wind, the bora, and there is less extraction. But despite the fact that the wine on the right has got, the wines on the right have got more sugar, because it's double the amount of sugar, not necessarily I'm getting sweeter wines. I'm getting a lot of depth and intensity on the Levante wines.
But in the RDO extra dry, so the Levante version, we need to put a little bit of more sugar inside to balance the big structure that the wine have, because the influence of the winds, as you told before, the influence of the winds makes this natural concentration on the grapes that is bigger than the Levante Deponente version. So this is why we need to balance better with the sugar.
Okay, so too much acidity, and as a result, you want to balance it out.
Yeah.
To be honest, this brings me a question. Are you thinking, because it's a bit of a trend, to make any dosage zero? It sounds like, above all, when you move into the older vineyards and the grapes that we tasted, they seem to be having a good enough structure and aromatics to hold up even without residual sugar. Is that something that you're like to work on, or do you already have any plans?
Yeah, we will see, but we are studying about this.
That sounded like it's like a secret. So we will see, we're starting. So maybe expectations to find a dosage zero from Masottina. Altre domande, ragazzi? O curiosità o interventi che volete dare anche di feedback a Federico? Sì, scusa, tu c'era le domande qua. Okay, so apparently this is a message that was given for our friends that we've seen in New York and London. You guys have got, and at the end, which is now, because it's 10 minutes to go, you have got 3 more wines. Why are they so special? Why not us? I'm kidding. They have Costa Bella Prosecco Doc Treviso. Come? Okay, here in Milano we're going to taste later. So, Costa Bella Prosecco DOC Treviso, which is an organic wine. Via 20 Rosé Prosecco DOC Treviso. Costa Contrada Granda Extra Dry Conegliano Valdobbiadene Prosecco DOCG, which is, if I'm not mistaken, the wine that was awarded the highest score from Decante magazine from my sweet mentor, Steven Spurrier, and that was in 1996, as a matter of fact, right? So 96 points from the Canter. So you guys have got these 3 wines: Costa Bella Prosecco Doc, Via 20 Rosé Prosecco Doc Treviso, and the Contrada Granda Extra Dry Conegliano Valdobbiadene Prosecco DOCG. If we don't have any more questions, o Federico, se tu volevi dire qualcosa in più, se mi sono scordato di portare alla luce qualche informazione di cui mi sono dimenticato, questo è il momento. If we don't have any more questions, guys, I would like to say thank you all. New York, Miami, thank you guys for being with us. Thank you London, arrivederci anche qui da Milano. Grazie per aver riempito la stanza e per la degustazione. Grazie Federico.